Welcome to Momentum, a podcast breaking down the issues faced by women's sports, brought to you by Mecca Empower. I'm Kat Sasso, and each week I will be joined by experts and athletes as we dive deep into the world of women's sports and the trials and triumphs that exist within them. This week, I'm joined by AFLW #1 draft pick from 2016 and climate activist Nicola Barr. Before we dive into it with Nicola, though, I'm going to go get ready. This time we're talking about climate change. It's not just a global crisis, it is quickly becoming a game changer in the world of sport. In recent years, athletes across the globe have faced conditions that were once unthinkable, from heatwaves to snowstorms and everything in between. And here in Australia, it's a stark reality. We've seen the AFL, cricket and A-League matches postponed as temperatures soar to dangerous levels, while players from all codes are left to battle the extreme weather patterns that seem to be intensifying year by year. But it's not just about the disrupted schedules, it's about the athletes themselves, who are now fighting for way more than just a win on the field. They're fighting for their future. Take the young Matildas, for instance, who found themselves playing in knee-deep snow during a qualifier in Uzbekistan, an extraordinary and surreal example of how climate change is impacting sport worldwide. Here in Australia, one athlete is leading the charge to bring the issue of climate change to the forefront of sport. Nicola Barr has emerged as a powerful advocate for environmental sustainability. She's used her platform to highlight the urgent need for action, pushing for change not just within the AFL, but across all sports. Nicola's work has changed the way many Australians view the intersection of sport and climate change. It's no longer just a distant problem, it's a pressing issue that's affecting the games we love. Nicola, my first question for you. You were GWS's #1 draft pick in the inaugural AFLW draft way back in 2016. At that point, did you think that the league would be where it is now?
Wow, that sounds like such a long time ago now, 2016. But no, I probably didn't. I think when that inaugural draft happened, to be honest, I was probably still getting to learn the game myself. I'd been playing soccer for a really long time and, it was also new to me and I was just rapt to be involved. And since that inaugural draft, the competition has grown so much. There's obviously 18 teams now in the competition and I think the standard is getting better and better every year, and it's just so exciting to be a part of all of it.
And you get to leave a pretty important mark on the history of AFLW, being one of those inaugural players. What is a legacy that you want to leave behind?
I think just leaving the game in a better place than where it was, and I'm really lucky that I sort of started playing football after some incredible hard work had been put in place by legends of the game in the female space for a number of years before the AFLW competition, and they did incredible work actually being a part of starting an AFLW competition that didn't exist for so long. So I think being able to, I guess, take the game from then and leave it in a place from when I leave is something that's really important to me. But we wouldn't be in the position that we are today without the incredible work of some amazing trailblazers in the space beforehand.
Absolutely. And you just said you played soccer before you played footy. Since the AFLW didn't exist, was footy always an option, or was it just football to start off with and then you went into footy?
Yeah, I grew up overseas and didn't actually have anything to do with AFLW, but I know, speaking to my teammates who grew up here in Australia, they didn't have the opportunity to play football, or they did until they were sort of 12 years old and then had to go and step away from the game. They were told at 12 that they weren't allowed to play anymore. And I think that would have been incredibly difficult for, someone who's a young kid and just wants to play footy. Being told to then step away from the game would have been incredibly tough. And I think for them, they probably did go on to play different sports like soccer, netball, basketball. There was other sports that they had to then go and play. But then now to be playing AFLW again, I think, I think about one of my teammates, Alicia Eva, having played AFLW or AFL until she was 12, then stepping away from the game and now being back in it. It's incredible to see where it is now, but lots of girls growing up didn't have the opportunity to play all the way through, and that's probably the biggest difference between AFLW players and men's players up until now, is just that ability to not be able to play all the way through.
And how did you find yourself in AFLW, in the land of AFLW?
Yeah, I just started playing it at school when I was 17. An opportunity came up at school and they just sort of went to all the fittest or strongest or most skillful girls in the school playing other sports and said, do you want to give AFL a go? And I loved just playing any sport and trying something new. So I was like, yep, let's do it. And ever since I started kicking the footy, I just absolutely loved it. It was a sport that combined all the other skills that I loved from other sports. And it was also such a challenging sport, and I love to take that on. So yeah, haven't looked back since I was 17.
And you mentioned there's obvious barriers, gender barriers within sport. What was your first experience with gender barriers within sport and within AFLW?
Yeah, I think we're always fighting for more as women, and as you know, I think there's still, whilst we've come a really long way, there's still a long way to go. And you know, we talked before about the huge number of changes and improvement in AFLW over the last 9 seasons. But I think back to when I first started playing AFLW, and we were in sheds at the club, and you know, in a sort of knock, like what do you call it, like a temporary change room, and you know, from that place until now, we've seen so much change with facilities, with access to coaches, with access to medical staff, and just the general professionalism of I guess the women's team in typically men's spaces. But it's been amazing to see that progress. But yeah, I remember when we first started playing, the men's clubs were just like, what? Why are there women in here? This is so weird. And I think that's just not the case anymore. They're used to seeing us around, and you know, we've got a great relationship with men's players as well. So come a long way, but there's a long way to go.
Absolutely. And you are really, really big in the climate change space. And obviously, there is massive crossover between climate change and sport. But can you tell me where your story in that space started?
Yeah, I think growing up and moving around a lot as a kid, one of the things that my family always did was spend a lot of time in nature. So I've always had a real appreciation for being outdoors and being in nature. And when I started uni, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, and I ended up doing medical science. But it's probably always a part of me that was like, oh, should I have done environmental science? Or I know I've always been interested in that, but it was kind of like, oh, well, I've already started this degree now, so I'm not going to start again. And then in 2019, 2020, obviously we saw the Summer bushfires come through in Australia. And that was probably the first time where I'd had experience of climate change actually impacting what I did. You know, we got to training and walked outside in Western Sydney, and the sky was orange and there was like ash falling and you couldn't breathe properly. And, you know, we're outside running to do laps around the track, and you can't breathe properly. And as an athlete, obviously that's really important when you're pushing
Absolutely.
yourself. And so selfishly, you know, I probably wasn't attuned to how bad climate was in Australia until that moment, because a lot of people don't understand how bad it is until it affects their day-to-day life. And then when that happened, I started thinking, well, if I'm being impacted as an athlete with all of the resources around me to adapt my training, you know, I've got all the medical support I need, what does the Black Summer bushfires mean for kids who were playing sport and just love sport on Saturdays? You know, can they run around like I'm able to run around? And the answer was probably no. And it really forced me to think about how climate change is going to impact not just sport, but the way we live our lives. Sport is such a cornerstone of our communities here in Australia. It's such an important aspect of our lives. And I started getting really worried about the way that climate was going to impact sport now and into the future.
Absolutely. And it's a massive, massive talking point, particularly in those summer sports where we're seeing players training and playing in blistering heat and, you know, games having to be shifted to avoid it. How important is climate action for the future of, you know, summer sports specifically in Australia?
Yeah, and it's not just summer sports now as well. We're seeing even winter sports or sports that are being played outside of the summer months being impacted as well. Even I think it was earlier this year we had a game in Blacktown where it was 36 degrees and it was not summer. It was winter or spring. And I was like, oh my God, like it's 36 degrees right now in Western Sydney and we're not even in the middle of summer right now. So I think that it's really important for every part of the Australian society to play a role in climate action, because we, you know, if we're gonna make some big changes, everyone needs to get on board, no matter what part of, you know, the economy or industry or whatever you're a part of, you can make a change. And I guess I started looking at what I could do, and I thought, okay, well, I'm playing sport. Who do I know? Who can I talk to about this? And that's when I met Footy for Climate, which was started by Tom and Jasper Campbell after the Black Summer bushfires. And I just jumped on a Zoom call with them to say, okay, like this is something I'm really concerned about. You guys obviously are as well. How can I help? I know I play sport and I'm just an AFLW player, whatever, but like, what can I do to try and make some change in the sports industry, but to further climate action here in Australia? And they've been amazing, Tom and Jasper, in starting Footy for Climate. And I know they've got some really exciting things in the pipeline.
And, a lot of people always say that politics and sports, they shouldn't mix, but it is increasingly becoming a thing that we expect athletes to speak out on political issues. And, sports have really become a place for action and for change. So do you think that as an athlete, do you think that it is their place to have to say something about, the things going on in the world, whether it be climate change, anything else? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? And often athletes do get told, oh, just stick to the field, mate, just stick to your sport, mate. Like, you shouldn't be able to say anything on this. But the reality is that climate change affects us all. And athletes and professional sport have an incredible platform to be able to speak out about these things. And athletes have an outsized platform to be able to speak out about various different issues, including climate change. And it's also something we know athletes are really concerned about, not just for their own careers, but for their kids as well. Playing sport was so important to them growing up. So I think that athletes and sport, everyone has a role to play and a responsibility to play in speaking up about the things that they care about and that they're concerned about. And, in Australia, sport has such a special place in all of our hearts. And I think it creates, going to a sports game, even just as a fan, it's a real, it's an area where you can just have a really relaxed conversation. And if we're fans at a soccer game and it's hot one day in an A-Leagues game and we start talking about how hot it is, what a great opportunity for me to say, like, well, why do you think it's hot? And I think sport is somewhere where we can come together and celebrate our love for sport, but also make it easier to have challenging conversations about, different issues that are happening, including climate.
And can you tell me a bit about your work with Frontrunners?
Yeah, absolutely. Frontrunners was an agency started back in 2020 by Emma and David Pocock, who are amazing. And Dave, during his playing days at the Wallabies, I guess was probably, one of the few athletes that was really vocal about, various different social and environmental issues. And when Dave retired, Dave and Em both had a lot of athletes go up to him and say, I'm seeing these Black Summer bushfires happening. I'm really concerned about climate. Like, do you know what I can do as an athlete to talk about this issue? And that's when Dave and Emma put their heads together with their friend Lockie and said, all right, well, what about we start Frontrunners as an agency to sort of support athletes who are passionate about this and want to do something and make a difference, to be able to speak about climate in a way that makes sense to them, feels authentic to them, and also helps them to connect with their fans. So that's how Frontrunners was born. And one of the first things that Frontrunners did was run a campaign called The Cool Down, which was an open letter to the government at the time. The coalition was in power at the time, and the open letter called for stronger climate ambition or stronger climate action from the government. And I think that they had a target of signing up about 20 professional athletes for that open letter, and they had over 460 professional athletes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, sign up to support that letter. So amazing support, and again, just an indication of how passionate and concerned like athletes are about this issue. Mick Fanning, Buddy Franklin, Rachel Haynes, Pat Cummins all signed up to that letter, and a host of other athletes. So amazing to see, I guess, the passion that athletes have for climate action.
It's incredible because I don't think when you think about climate action, athletes are not the first people that you think of who would be really passionate about it. But considering you guys are outside in all different kinds of weather all the time, it's really incredible. Are there any people who you've kind of spoken to and you've kind of got them on board with your cause as well?
Yeah, for sure. So my role at Frontrunners is I'm decarbonising sport lead at Frontrunners. So Frontrunners started really as an athlete-led organisation. It still is an athlete-led organisation, and we've done a lot of work to support footy for climate and cricket for climate, and often do a bit of work with surfers for climate. And then there's an amazing group of young players from the A-Leagues who have started this group called Our Greener Pitch. in collaboration with the Professional Footballers Association, the PFA. So they've done an amazing work, and particularly speaking with young athletes like Emma Ilioski, she's over in Scotland now but was playing for Canberra United, Riddy and Cowley, who's an Australian race walker. They're both so passionate about this and really want to make a difference in their bubble. And I think the thing with athletes, and this is probably the biggest thing I've learned with front runners, is that yes, it's amazing to have really high profile athletes like David, like Pat Cummins, like Mick Fanning speaking out about climate, but athletes can also play an incredible role within their sports organisations, doing inside track work to really getting their organisations to think about climate. So it's not just the public advocacy side of things that we support at Front Runners. It's, helping athletes who might not have a huge profile but are really passionate about this have a conversation at their sports organisation. So we're seeing incredible work of athletes like Bailey Banfield at Fremantle Dockers, Emma Ilioski, who I spoke about before with Canberra United, and it's just incredible to see how excited and passionate they are about climate action.
And you mentioned before your medical science degree.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to me a little bit about your education, because you are so successful?
Oh gosh, don't ask me anything about medical science because I could not remember. All I can remember from that degree is sitting in labs being like, I just want to go to training. So that's about the extent of my knowledge there. But no, in all seriousness, I think doing that degree was fantastic. It was really challenging at the time, getting through the medical science degree, and I was drafted, I think in my second year of university, to the Giants. So yeah, it was.
And second year uni is brutal.
Yeah, second year
the
uni
most brutal
was
year.
so hard.
Yeah.
So I think whilst I probably couldn't recall too much like knowledge from the degree, I think my ability to complete the degree, challenge myself, and like really put myself out there when it was a challenging degree and I was trying to play footy, was a skill that I think has set me up really well. But yeah, probably don't have too much to tell you about medical science itself.
But you've gone on to do a few other things as well, haven't you?
Yeah. So with study, you mean?
Yeah.
So I did a, what was it called? It's like a business sustainability leadership short course, like 12 weeks.
Sorry guys, I just had to find that one deep in the dark depths of my brain.
Who was that through? It was through Cambridge Sustainability Business School, Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership, I think is what it was called. And I had a few people recommend that course to me. And that was around the time where I had started speaking to Tom and Jasper from Footy for Climate. I'd met Emma through Front Runners. And I thought, okay, I've finished my bachelor degree now. I really want to get involved more in climate and sustainability. Like what's out there that I can try and learn from. And I'm in a really privileged position being able to play football and have a little bit of time to study as well. So looked into that course, completed it, and it just pushed me to want to do even more. So I'm studying my Masters of Sustainability now, which has been fantastic and challenging at times.
That is incredible.
Yeah, like I said, I'm really lucky to be playing footy and have some spare time to do some study and learn along the way. And it's a great time to try and learn new things while you're playing football, because not only will it hopefully set you up for success later on, I always talk to my teammates about, trying to do some study while they play, but it also means that when footy's not going well, you can study. And if study's not going well, you can get to training. So I think it's nice to have a few different things going on.
Yeah. And I think my next question, which you pretty much just answered, was just how important do you think your education is going to be post-footy? And have you got any advice maybe for young players on that front?
Yeah, I think education is amazing. It's such a privilege to be able to do study, whatever that looks like, whether it's a TAFE course, a uni course. There's so many personal development opportunities that are out there if you're lucky enough to be in a position to do those kinds of things. And I think for me, like, I'm definitely not rushing through any sort of education, but I think if I can just keep on top of it while I'm playing, hopefully that sets me up for success post-football. Hopefully that's not for a while, but yeah, I absolutely love studying and learning about new things, and I think that it also really connects you to people that are outside of your sports bubble as well. You can get so caught up in thinking that football or whatever sport you play is everything. And yes, of course, it's important just like any other job, but it's really good to have study because it gives you a different perspective on things.
Going back to your footy career, How have you, as a woman, and also with your climate change and your activism, how has that affected you as a person? How have you grown as a person with that?
Yeah, I think it's funny, like sometimes people go, "Oh, why do you want to talk about climate on your socials? Aren't you worried about like getting backlash or anything like that?" And I'm like, "Well, first of all, I don't have that many followers, so not really too much of an issue. Second of all, I think that as a female athlete, we're so used to fighting for our rights, speaking up, demanding more. So, speaking up for different social and environmental issues comes a lot more naturally, I think, to female athletes because
Mhm.
you're used to pushing for more. In terms of how it's affected me and changed me, I think I'm a very different person now as a 28-year-old to what I was as a young 18-year-old starting footy. I think that it's taught me to listen to different perspectives, and when things get challenging, to try and step back from the situation and think about, where the other person or the other people might be coming from. So, yeah, forcing you to sort of think about different people's perspectives, I think, is really important, and critically analysing different situations is such a great tool to have in your back pocket, whether that's for sport or for life more generally.
Yeah, and the conversation around AFLW, obviously it has grown so much
Mhm.
since its inception, but where would you like to see it? Where would you like to see it go?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I have this chat with my teammates all the time, and whilst, the ultimate goal would probably be for it to be full time, but there's a lot of things about the AFL men's competition that I'm like, I'm not sure we'd want to copy it exactly. Like I think we can be our own unique thing as well. So I'd probably love to see it be full time at some stage, and I know that that's in the pipeline, which is exciting. But I just like burped. Cut that out. Um, but I think, yeah, I'd love to see AFLW be full time down the track in a few years, and I think for younger players coming through, the standard of football and the standards of professionalism that they have compared to when I was 20 is on a different level, which is exciting. But the main thing would probably be seeing it become full time and become better resourced, particularly when it comes to coaching and the medical side of things. I think where AFLW is at right now, and it's probably similar with a few other women's sports, is the players, there's very high expectations of what the players contribute and what the players do, but that's not necessarily always being matched with the resourcing around the program. So, for example, I've got lots of young teammates who don't work another job anymore and just do football. So they've got all the time and energy to be there full time, potentially, but they might not have full time physios or full time coaches around to support them to get the best out of themselves. Does that
Mhm.
make sense? So
Yeah.
I think what I'd love to see is the program become full time for everyone involved, because we can't do what we do without coaches and without medical staff and without support staff around us.
Absolutely. And have you had any conversations, obviously, with your club, but do you know if there are any conversations surrounding climate change with the clubs and the AFL as well, and AFLW, of course?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that AFL's taken some huge strides in sustainability, which is fantastic. They had Joe Gilbert as their head of sustainability up until recently. She's now moved on to the Hawks in a commercial role, but Joe did an amazing job of really getting this off the ground at the AFL at the AFL and in Melbourne, and that's been fantastic to see. And whilst she's stepped away, they've now appointed a new head of sustainability, Rita, who comes from the Richmond Football Club and led their sustainability work at the Tigers. And she is incredible, Rita. Like, I think she's just going to do amazing stuff at the AFL. And I think that a lot of the AFL is on board with this as well. If I think back to, I think it was 2009, the AFL actually had a green round. That's 2009. That is
Yeah.
years ago. So, I think the AFL's always done a good job of, um, you know, being a first mover in a lot of this stuff. And they've got a long way to go, but I think they're getting the right people in place there to really have a positive impact. And I know Rita's really pumped about the role and is going to do great work there. So we're excited to work with her at Front Runners as well, and just really pumped to see what she does there. And then I think with clubs, the exciting thing is they're asking questions. They want to learn what they can do to start their sustainability journey. And a lot of clubs already have done that as well, which is fantastic. I know at the Giants, my experience there is that, we implemented lots of recycling bins at clubs. We've made sure that we've replaced all the lights with LED lights, so we're more energy efficient. We've got solar on the roof. So there's lots of things that clubs can do that are simple steps to take to try and reduce their own emissions. I think the next step for the AFL and for clubs and for sport more broadly is really to start, talking about this more on their social media, because it's a really great news story talking about not only what they're doing to help the planet, but also about cost savings, because we know that switching to renewable energy can save so much money as well. But I think there's a lot to do, but a lot is already being done as well. And, from my own experience, I know that players are having the conversations as well. I think whenever my teammates go and hover over the bins with a piece of rubbish, they're looking around being like, is Nick going to make sure I put this in the right bin? Where is she?
Which one is the right bin?
And I think whilst we need action from we need collective action to really try and keep global warming well below 2 degrees, but individual action is really important as well. And I think starting the conversation at your club, or whether it's your local club or you play professionally, is a really big step to changing our psyche in Australia.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before I let you go, though, I like to give my guests a little bit of a challenge. Okay. I want to ask you who's a woman in sport that has inspired you, whether it's an athlete or someone working behind the scenes in sport. Who is a woman who has inspired you lately?
Well, I think my number one inspiration at the moment is probably Steph Catley. Obviously was thrown into the captaincy with the Matildas sort of last minute. Yeah. And I just so admire the way she went about that, and just her professionalism, her drive and her focus to really lead that team, I think has been really admirable. And I think what she does is great. She's clearly competitive and really driven and focused. And she's probably the female athlete that I'm looking up to the most at the moment.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Nicola, for joining me today. It was amazing to hear your story and all the work that you're doing. And thank you to everyone at home for watching. Please make sure that you subscribe, leave reviews, and let us know who you want to see next time on Momentum.